Okay, I have just been dropped off at however you pronounce this, Chaukhtatgyi Paya, or temple, and by taxi. And what we're going to be doing today is walking from the place that I'm at now, whatever it is, to the next place. I can't even come close to pronouncing that. It starts with an N. Then we'll walk down to where that lake is so I can see that blue lake. And then we'll go generally west to the Shwegadon Paya Temple, which is incredible. It's the great site of Rangoon. We went by it in a taxi. It's huge, it's beautiful, and it's surrounded by temple after temple after temple for what probably composes 5 or 6 square block area. And then we'll continue to walk further south, perhaps to the National Museum, to a restaurant, and the last Mughal, or the Indian ruler, before the British conquered it apparently, and then back to the hostel. So a pretty good long walk back. My strategy is take a taxi out and then walk your way back home. The incentive is just like it is for horses. Now what's interesting is it's a huge building, and it really just looks like a huge warehouse that has a lot of the affectations of what one might imagine to be a temple. And I assume that the entire area that I'm looking at now is part of the overall complex, either originally or in its timely, over time expansion. We're now just inside, and the most obvious reason for the huge warehouse type structure is Buddha. A reclining Buddha, obviously. What greater significance than that of the Buddha, I don't know, because I'm not that knowledgeable. Now here the Buddha, with no disrespect intended, seems to be either feminine or a very gracile, I think is the word, facial design of a man. And this is called the episode, and perhaps just a description of the reason and basis, and the people who put this together in 1959, construction completed in 74. But I think the last line is most telling. It says, "May all well-wishers and celestial gods and Brahmas share our merits." In other words, merits were achieved by all of the people who contributed to this project, including the 300 monks who consecrated the image for 9 days. I just like to look at the detail. Here is a side chapel, for lack of a better term, and probably serves the same function as it does in Catholic or Christian churches that we visit. In so many places all over the world, I've seen restorers maintaining edifices that are important to them. And here, just another example. It's always fun to see people doing this kind of thing. And whether they're replacing the gold and or the mirrors, I don't know, but it would seem certainly the mirrors. Let's see if we can get in a little bit closer. The bamboo scaffolding used not only for this relatively modest job and a considerable height, but even massive buildings may use this kind of scaffolding, particularly in China. Here we're on a raised platform, and I will give you the exquisite pleasure of viewing, first of all, the Here we're on a raised platform, and I will give you the exquisite pleasure of viewing, first of all, the toe prints of the Buddha, and then we'll now we're looking at the Buddha from below. Notice the elaborate gown. Again, probably done with mirrors. You have to imagine for the devout Buddhist, this is a very visceral type of monument and portrayal of the Buddha. This is a pictorial representation of the 108 distinguishing marks on both the soles of the Buddha. They represent the three worlds, 59 indicating the inanimate world, 21 the animate world, and 28 the world of condition. The essence of this is that the Buddha is greater than all three worlds. So the devout may be able to interpret what we're seeing here. On the other hand, it may be as elusive an insight as the incredible iconography of a Christian cathedral. And here the backside, with all due respect, of the Buddha. This is shot off the balcony at the rear of the site. You can see sundry temples in the background, one of which we may be going to, the one that starts with an N that I cannot even come close to pronouncing. Wherever Buddha is prevalent, the number of Buddhas is significant, and the more there is, apparently, the greater the merit. Notice that even before this fence was put up close to the Buddha platform, those spiky retardants to the foolish were put up on this steel stupa structure. Not sure what these are for, but perhaps they're for washing your feet. Often something that's done within a society, or they may simply be for drinking water. Again, maybe this bucket is used to wash off your feet. I just asked, and that temple, whose name I can't pronounce, starts with an N, is that one. So we will now navigate over to that. I don't think that in the foreground is the access to it, but perhaps it is. Here I'm at a temple, kind of a small shrine, if you will. And notice the animals. We'll walk around and take a look at them. Most prominent, of course, is the elephant, which is very significant in the Ramayana, I think. And this may be the rat, because there is also the year of the rat. Not an auspicious character, usually. The tiger. This perhaps the dragon, not just a lion, but a dragon. So what we saw was just her tradition that she bathes the Buddha and the icon beneath it in 3 cupfuls of water, and then from that little pool that we look at, she takes a bucket full of water and replenishes the silver bucket for the next person. Notice the very elongated ear of Buddha. This little structure appears to be something that would hold a statue, but there's nothing in it. It looks like a very large rectory that you'd see in Christian churches. Here another view of Buddha from the side. Perhaps one who's devout or otherwise can gain some insight from the various views that we get of this Buddha's face, in the same way that we get insights into the personality of a character in any sculpture. Here are donation boxes, presumably for different purposes. I saw some men over there loading fairly good-sized donation boxes, all labeled Thailand. Again, how it connects to that, I don't know. This may be for the different days of the week, because remember there are 8 days. I think Wednesday has 2 days, 2 half days, one simply a ceremonial day. Maybe down here the dates are Rahu and the other one there. So if you were born on one of these days, it may have great significance to you, and you gain considerable merit if you contribute to these boxes. This is a long corridor in the front area of the Buddha. We'll exit down through here and to the right and south towards that other site. Here another perspective on dogs. They just lie anywhere they like, tranquilly, eating off the refuse and leftovers of the society. Cats smartly finding a high precipice dogs can't get. And here are souvenir shops where those who are devout and in a most devout state having left can purchase little gewgaws made out of it. So here we enter, I think, down this long corridor. Small school of children in a small, modest home. There is a monk carrying his begging bowl, but also he's carrying his lunch pail, just to make sure he doesn't get enough to eat the other way. So here we are at the entrance of the N Temple. Since I can't pronounce it, no sense insulting it and myself by trying. Fresh paint. These are particularly pretty. The ones yesterday were not particularly pretty. They're just unkempt, considering that they're the gemstones of the tourist interest initially, at least, when you get to town. You think they would aggrandize those? Here's some smaller stupas and an outlying temple or building for some purpose. And these may be homes for the monks. This is interesting because it shows a character using the paso in the most efficient form, if it's still called a paso. So here we enter into this temple. And there's the halfway way of wearing a paso. And a jovial face he has, friendly. The face of Buddha, one of them, perhaps. I don't recall from my time in Thailand what these hand positions represent and arm positions, but the left arm folded across the body, the right arm down, the fingers hanging down. Usually these positions have a very specific meaning that relate perhaps to the character of the individual Buddha being portrayed. And I think the different Buddhas that we see are Buddhas perhaps from his different lifetimes. This is interesting, this icon, but what's interesting is its tail is in the water. It's got to be some significance because that's the only place there's water in here. Look at that beautiful carving. Now I don't know if that's wood, I doubt it, but it's made to look like wood. Now much of that up on top looks like it's wood, so perhaps that work is. And notice the stupa-like design of the headdress of this Buddha. I want to see the carving up on top. Look at this series of characters in positions of supplication, praying to the Buddha. This is an interesting diorama. It shows I think that's the python. No, I don't think I'm correct, but it's the snake. But these may represent the various lives of the Buddha, going off into his past until he achieved what I think is called Nibbana or Nibbana. I can't pronounce it right. And that was where he had shuffled off the misery of his past lives. Just a side hallway, if you will, and the treatment given to these columns. Side buildings that we couldn't see too well before, and we can see a little bit better if you don't mind the grid work. Of course, the first temple with the great reclining Buddha. Seeing the snake again, I realized it's called a cobra. And here there are two intertwined cobras, the two we looked at earlier. As I panned from one face to the other, I think we are looking at individuals that are different. I came back over to this side to see if I could get a sense of emotion or of the specific emotion of this Buddha. I think it may be the compassionate Buddha. There's certainly a tranquility, even more so seen from the other side. Again, these may be a shrine for each of the 8 days. Look at this spectacular bell. I wonder if it once hung in a temple. I wonder if that's made out of iron or wood. Here, some kind of a building, but all abandoned. All but abandoned too. All but some specialized use I can't perceive. Although maybe the upper floors are used while this below is not. Now we'll attempt to navigate almost due south, but with a slight west inclination. See if we can run into the lake. I was walking up a main street that I was told to follow. And I fortunately asked a lady who spoke just a little smattering of English. She said I need to go back down the road I was traveling, turn right, and go up this street here to Shwegadon. So I'm going to miss going to the lake. I think I already passed that. Lives in this little tent-like structure. They've got their little bed set up, and they've got their pots and pans all cleaned. This is the main tourist route. Here's a little squatter's encampment, if you will, on this back road. Whole thing made out of blue tarp, but it provides life and survivability to those who live here. So exactly where I'm approaching from, according to my map, and that is Shwegadon. Maybe where it says Martyrs Mausoleum, because Shwegadon is slightly to my southwest, I think. Either that or I'm even farther west than that, but I wanted to be farther east. I'm going to miss the lake, no big deal. Here, I think I will walk around this lake just for the fun of it. Other temple, my guess is that early on, a myriad of temples were built close to the Shwegadon Great Temple for the gravitas it had. These are probably some symbolic, well, just symbolic monks, I guess. Again, these interesting, almost Disney-like characters that pervade this religion. Without knowing for sure, but seeing a military man at his post here, for what reason I don't know, but that may be exactly where we've arrived at, is Martyrs Mausoleum. I don't know how to read Myanmar or Burmese, but there are two words, and maybe that reflects Martyrs Mausoleum, particularly if in their languages and ours, mausoleum is longer than the first word. There we see some kind of obelisk that may be the monument to the martyrs. It's interesting, that star, not a red star of Russia or China or Korea, I forget which, but it is the mausoleum here, and very nicely maintained. This is the way places should look in Myanmar because of the terrific amount of water that they have. Of course, in the rainy season, much more than now, but this is beautifully maintained. This is the kind of level that Myanmar should aspire for all of its great monuments, particularly the ones in downtown Rangoon. No big deal. No, I saw an opening over there entering into that little lake. I think I'll go over and see if I can get in there. Don't know what that symbolizes. I think it's a woman pouring water or something over a man's sword. And the man on the obelisk has two apparent swords in his hand. The boat that people who maintain this pretty little lake can access it. A lovely little park-like setting, cool, inviting for the people that live in these very rough accommodations behind me. Notice you can see a little bit of the sign on that tree of reverence that Asians have for big old trees. And from this view, I believe the man is sharpening his sword on a whetstone. And look closely at either the hairdress or the dressing of the hair. It's been ancient tradition that long hair is prized, even to the extent when monks to be, young boys who have long hair, cut it off. Their mothers and sisters may use that same hair to lengthen and embellish the hair they already have, as we now do in the United States. Notice the sword is bent. Don't know if that's intentional or something that's happened after the sculpture was in place. Okay, I don't know if that's the entrance to Shwegadon. In the background we can see it to the right, but we'll probe. Right next to a noisy cane crushing machine, preparing the delicacy for someone. This is probably the main entrance with these two dragons on either side. Now we enter into the underbelly of this most revered shrine in Myanmar. First, the gauntlet of shrine memorabilia for your own home, because inspiration does not end with your experience here. Little kid's drum set here in the first great room. It's interesting to travel the world and go into all of the different manifestations of people's faith. Whether it's these cathedrals, temples, and here the next level up. Notice the beautiful ceilings. And once there was probably a time, maybe, when there were not the various little shop kiosks, but maybe not. Apparently each level has its entire circumference level, which will have even more shops. Notice the walkway up above. Next top, notice all this carving. I wonder if it's real wood, if I can tell. It is, it should be teak. Or a second wood that's almost as valuable as wood. Imagine the time, not to mention the creativity involved in all of this carving throughout this temple. As great as any cathedral in Europe. My guess is it's layer of temple after temple after temple, depending upon what you call it and what its function may be. It's particularly pretty, isn't it? Some kind of light aqua color, whether it's in the glass or not, I don't know. So underneath those spires that we walked up a moment ago, and then I paid my ticket, and now I am free to wander about and take videos. Just imagine the work that went into this. It's really a simple little room, but with very pretty coloration with that. And it's actually a blue paint used in the crevices between the mirrors. This is all inlay stone here, but again using that aqua somehow. Here again is where we entered, the northern stairway. Good to know, since that's where my shoes are. The main stupa, or whatever it's called, Chedi or Zeti. I think here, Chedi in Thailand. Surrounded this little shrine, but much larger, and then the grandest of them all, British these look, or at least quasi-British. I wonder if that reflects a mix of the two cultures from that history. Notice those fans that the monks carry today. They're a statuary fan and a real one as part of the statue to shield their eyes from the sun as they go through their daily in search of alms. What's fascinating from the viewpoint of video and being here is the incredible perspectives. Here, tier after tier in 3D of stupas and Buddhas and the icons that represent or glorify them. There are a couple set up their computer doing something. Just meandering about. I just think it's interesting to let the camera probe deeper and deeper into that view. It just seems like so much eye candy. You walk in one direction and stop, do an about face, and then see all of this. I always avoid, which are always here, particularly for Americans and Europeans, because I don't want their constant blather meddling with the impressions and the feelings I get as I wallow in this eye candy. Remember, the more Buddhas, the better. You can hear those wind chimes up on top of that settee. Now, we're not looking at the big one yet. From just every vantage point as you walk through is the pleasure of the uniqueness. Notice those lights. Seeming so counter to this purpose of this place, but definitely in my mind. This unique, if for no other reason. People pray A man talks on his cell phone and a group of friends bring their food and have dinner here. The eye just wishes it had a way to take it all in one fell swoop. The irony is, the eye is always better at this than my camera will ever be. Some welcoming figures for this small temple. Notice the clock. Reminds me of Thailand, where all of the temples had large, full-height grandfather clocks. And how rich is the embellishment of this ceiling and these columns that support that huge bell. Was it always here? Is it ever rung, and when? And what must that sound be like? There's something kind of novel, this column. Unique but unable to rival the Zedi in the background. People come here to have dinner or lunch, a picnic. Imagine this, in Chartres or Notre Dame. And yet, a better place for them to the peace of your God. Here in this building, a nice mix of wood and these columns. I assume that some wealthy person or organization gained a great merit by building this and all the rest that we see. Here are interesting, and I've seen it before, the Buddhas with the apparent gold face. And again, the more Buddhas, the better. And then when I finally turn around into the centerpiece of this monument, is Shwegadon herself, or itself. And then when I finally turn around into the centerpiece of this monument, is Shwegadon herself, or itself. This small temple, unique because it's round. Yet there are places and people who come to pray. We can only imagine what solace this man gets from his devotions. Interesting, these parasols. Architecturally, some of the elements of these Chadayan temples are called umbrellas or parasols, but here this one is devoted by Stephen and Winnie. And one wonders at the purpose of the stone, this large stone, for this little chapel attached to this temple. It's interesting how the architects of these temples strive for uniqueness amidst its incredible competition. And so often happens for me in particular, I guess, is that even when you're assaulted by this grandeur, it starts to get redundant. It's an interesting shrine because of its Lovely, subdued colors. No matter the magnificence of the temples that surround her, Shwegadon dominates everything. There's still another entrance into this huge complex. Currency exchange and ATM. Just want to look at some of the detail of the carving in this entryway. If this is truly old, you wonder how much historians learn from their culture of that day. There's some interesting little 3D vignettes. Unnoticed by most. Most welcome sign, just not necessary at this moment. Magnificent edifice. I don't know if we go inside or not. I haven't seen any evidence of that. Some are hollow. Now I work my way down the other side of this complex back to the north entrance that I entered from. And my shoes. Look at that, isn't that something? By now, I just try to search out something that looks unique. Because it really does overwhelm the senses. It'd be interesting someday to see a computer animated graphic of when these items were built. In other words, their sequence done on a timeline thing in a animated video. And it couldn't have occurred all at once. Pretty colors the Thai ladies and the Myanmar ladies wear.
No, my mom said don't keep the pocket. If I have like this, see first.
Much of what I shoot simply because I haven't shot it yet. And it's more, so I shoot. Tea dresses. I think that's some kind of a drum symbol. These are some of the Noviate monks going through the required reading so they can memorize all of the passages of the couple of the buildings we were in when I first walked on that side. And then that strange temple there, strange only because it's unique. How the Buddhas here are cloaked. These are probably some of the living quarters maybe even administrative facilities for the monks who are here all the time. So I first entered over there, so somehow I have to get back there. The elevator, but that seems rather wimpy. I would love to have one of these vases in my house. How beautiful they are. Look at those. Should be the south entrance to Shwegadon Paya Temple. And behind me is the People's Park, or at least a grand portion of it, with this beautiful esplanade, for lack of a better term. To my right, a shopping center with some great little restaurants. I wish they had these in central Yangon. The lawn's got a covey of egrets on it. It's interesting how, like Athens, the center tourist area is an absolute horrific mess of poverty, I guess is the best way to describe it. And yet there are places when you get out of that are beautiful. Same thing here. This completely belies what you will find in the core of Yangon. I'm walking alongside of part of the People's Park, a very pretty green area with this remnant of... That's interesting, if you can see it, a former, probably retired Myanmar commercial airline from Myanmar Airways. Usually when you see a plane in someone's country's park, it's a shot down US fighter that they're displaying. Assuming this is still part of the People's Park. It goes 2 super major blocks down there. Way down here. If so, it's reflective of the era when kings, both in Europe and here, commandeered huge tracts of land for their own hunting and other pleasures. I'm walking in a kind of heaven. This is a shaded side of the street with trees, and occasionally there's a pretty stiff little breeze. The whole area I'm traveling along on this side of the street, this whole block so far, has these very large, old, and now dilapidated homes in them. Who knows what this was once for?